Dust danced in the golden light of dawn as the sun broke over the vast plains. In the shadow of a sprawling ranch, two figures stood apart, worlds colliding in silence. Ilara, her dark hair framing a face of resilience, sat in a worn wooden chair, her eyes filled with unspoken dreams. The rancher, tall and rugged, surveyed his land, hands calloused from years of toil, a weight of solitude resting on his shoulders. Each morning, he would watch her, feeling an inexplicable tug at his heart. She could not walk, yet an unyielding spirit burned within her. The chair creaked beneath her as she shifted, searching the horizon for freedom, her fingers tracing invisible paths in the air. He approached, his gaze steady, filled with unacknowledged longing, a silent promise lingering between them. In a world that sought to confine her, the spark of all that could be began to flicker. Ilara stared out from the grimy wooden porch, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun dipped low, a fiery orb bleeding into the earth. The scent of dust mingled with a hint of wild sage, setting the stage for an evening that felt too still, too heavy. She shifted in her makeshift chair, the wheels mocking her, a reminder of her stillness, an echo of her brother's betrayal. A distant rumble of thunder rolled across the hills, the sky hinting at a storm, but the tempest within her was the one that truly brewed. It was a storm of emotions, a whirlwind that tossed her heart into the abyss of confusion and despair. The day had begun with laughter, the lightness of her siblings' voices ringing through the air, but it spiraled into chaos when her brother staggered in, his breath reeking of cheap whiskey and broken dreams. With slurred words and a wild gaze, he had made his decision, sealing her fate with an ignorance that shook her to her core. The world shifted beneath her as she realized the depths of his desperation. He was trading her for coin, as though she were nothing more than a burden to be cast away. The weight of his decision crushed her, leaving behind the jagged shards of trust, love, and family. As the minutes ticked away, Ilara watched the sun slip beneath the horizon, surrendering to darkness, mirroring her own descent into uncertainty. Soon, figures loomed in her murky vision, shadows against the twilight. Among them was Silas, his silhouette etched against the dimming sky, a wealthy rancher whose reputation preceded him. Dressed in fine leather and topped with a Stetson that cast a shadow over his features, he was an indomitable figure, but he felt worlds away. He exuded authority, yet she sensed an emptiness behind his sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes, as if he were a man suffocated by the weight of his own empire. Silas stepped closer, a mixture of curiosity and indifference painted across his face. He approached her with the gait of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted, but there was a flicker of something else, perhaps an awareness of her trapped spirit. Ilara's mind raced, connecting dots she had never wished to acknowledge. She felt scrutinized, vulnerable under his gaze, as though her entire existence was reduced to a mere product on display. The world faded around them. The sounds of a bustling crowd dissipated, leaving only the palpable tension of their brief encounter. In that moment, the breach between them was insurmountable. Silas looked at her and his expression shifted, momentarily softened by something unnameable, but it quickly vanished, replaced by a cold resolve. She could see it in the tightening of his mouth, the set of his shoulders. He had made his choice, and she was not part of it. He was captivated by her circumstance, not her soul, and that distinction lodged itself painfully in her chest. Their destinies had converged in this moment, but she felt like a ghost in her own body, unseen and unheard. The world around her blurred into a muted backdrop, a theater where she was both spectator and prisoner. She wondered what it felt like for him, this man who had money, power, and a life that seemed to pulse with vibrant colors, unlike her muted existence. Silas was a titan in the expanse of the ranch, while she was a mere whisper of a girl who was meant to be seen, yet rendered invisible by her limitations. In that fleeting interplay, she sensed his emotional distance, a divide that echoed in the silence between their shared breaths. As the deal was finalized, the weight of ownership was thrust upon her, a mantle she had never wished to wear. Silas turned his back on her and strode away, each step a reminder of her alienation. The night deepened, wrapping around her like a shroud. Ilara felt the void he left behind. She was now bound to this life against her will, her spirit a captive while her body lay dormant. The distance between them expanded, a chasm filled with resentment, despair, and the silent promise of rebellion. With each breath, the sorrow settled deeper in her chest, but a flicker of determination ignited within her. They were different, this stranger and she, yet within her something stirred, a need to reclaim her story. Bonded through, yet separated by trauma, Ilara would not allow her brother's betrayal or Silas's indifference to define her existence. In the shadows of an uncertain future, she harbored a flicker of hope, one that whispered of defiance and the instinct to run, to escape the chains that bound her. As darkness enveloped the ranch, Ilara found herself poised on the precipice of her new reality, a fierce resolve igniting within her. Silas was a wealthy rancher, but she was a girl. She was the flame of a wildfire waiting to erupt, unaware of the path she would carve through the night, toward a freedom she would fight for with every breath. The sound of gravel crunched underfoot as Ilara approached the sprawling ranch, its silhouette stark against a sky stained with the last hues of dusk. A gust of wind swirled around her, carrying the scent of dry earth and the distant scent of hay. Ilara shivered, not entirely from the chill that wrapped around her, but from the uncertainty looming ahead. Silas stood at the entrance, arms crossed, his silhouette framed by the fading light. She had heard whispers about him. Wealthy, distant, a man made of grit and granite. He was an enigma waiting to shape her new world, yet here she was, nothing more than the shadow she cast, her legs unable to carry her. As she reached the porch, Silas regarded her with a steady gaze, his blue eyes piercing through the silence. He did not offer a greeting, nor did he need to. Words felt unnecessary in that moment. She could sense a weight of unspoken expectation in the air, a tangible resistance held just beneath the surface, as if the land itself held its breath. Ilara glanced past him, taking in the sprawling fields that stretched infinitely, the barn looming like a guardian in the backdrop. Everything felt vast, and in her heart, dread began to bloom. "Inside," Silas finally commanded, his voice deep and steady. Ilara felt a strange mixture of relief and trepidation as she followed him into the ranch house. The interior was both inviting and imposing. Dark wood beams crossed the ceiling, and the smell of cedar filled the air. She could see the remnants of a fire smoldering in the hearth, but it did little to thaw the chill inside her. She felt small, dwarfed by the space and the man who now held dominion over her fate. Silas moved through the room with an ease that made Ilara feel like a statue trapped in a tapestry of bustling life. He placed his hat on a hook by the door, revealing the tousled hair beneath. A sharp angle of his jaw cast shadows across his face, highlighting the ruggedness of a man who had weathered storms, both external and internal. She was acutely aware of every breath, every movement, as if the air between them crackled with the electric anticipation of uncharted territory. Silas turned, his gaze settling on her, and she felt an unsettling flush creep across her cheeks. "Kitchen's through there," he said, indicating a doorway, his voice an unyielding bark. Ilara nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and wheeled her chair toward the kitchen. The linoleum floors were cool under her palms as she maneuvered with painstaking care. The quaintness of the kitchen felt almost out of place against the weight of her new reality. Copper pots hung from the walls, their shiny surfaces reflecting the fading light, casting her reflection as a ghostly figure trapped inside a life she hadn't chosen. A heavy pot simmered on the stove, and the aroma of something savory enveloped her. She wondered if Silas would find her unworthy of his attention, an extension of his property rather than a person. As she stirred the contents, glancing over her shoulder, she caught a glimpse of Silas leaning against the archway, watching her with an unreadable expression. She felt vulnerable under his scrutiny, yet a flicker of determination ignited within her. She wouldn't be a bystander in her own life. Not today, not ever. After a while, Silas joined her in the kitchen, ripping into a loaf of bread, the crunch echoing in the stillness. Ilara noticed the way he moved, confident, purposeful, yet threaded with an undercurrent of solitude. The tension hung between them like a rope pulled too tight, and she dared to ask, "What do you expect of me?" It slipped out before she could catch herself. Those words were the first honest breath she'd taken since stepping onto the ranch. Silas paused, his finger poised over the edge of the bread, and in that moment, Ilara caught a glimpse of something deeper in his eyes. "Survival," he replied, the word blunt as a knife. He took a bite, chewing thoughtfully, and Ilara wondered how survival meant something so entirely different for each of them. She was to survive the ghosts of her past, while he battled the demons of his present. The weight of it hung between them, heavy and suffocating, yet somehow propelling her forward. As the evening settled into darkness, Ilara nestled into the quiet rhythm of the ranch, the echoing silence a stark contrast to the raucous life of her former home. In that newfound calm, something within her began to stir. She felt the first flicker of hope igniting in her chest, tentative yet fierce. Perhaps she would not simply run from a life dictated by another. Perhaps she could run toward something even if the path was uncertain, even if Silas remained a riddle she struggled to solve. Each breath filled with the scent of fresh bread and simmering stew was a reminder. She was here, and she would find her way. Ilara's mornings began just as the sun edged over the horizon, spilling soft light across the sprawling ranch. Silas had a knack for routine. He rose before the dawn broke, his sturdy boots echoing against the wooden floors as he moved through the house. Ilara could hear the creak of the floorboards, the rustle of his jeans, and the occasional hum of an old country tune that drifted in and out of his morning rituals. She lay in her small room, the walls adorned with faded photographs of a different life, a distant memory of freedom that now felt unreachably far. After he had set out to tend to the horses, the house would settle into a quiet rhythm, punctuated occasionally by the sound of Silas's deep voice calling the animals. Ilara listened, her heart tightening as she imagined the ease with which he moved among them, his frame tall and confident, commanding respect in the simple way he carried himself. Every morning, the longing filled her, a mix of admiration and resentment that knotted in her chest. She could only watch from her window, yearning to join him in the world outside, where the sunlight danced over the fields and the wildflowers flourished in bold colors. The stark contrast of their lives weighed heavily on her every thought. While Silas galloped across the open land, Ilara remained confined to the walls of her room, her legs a prison she could never escape. Silas would return from his labors, dirt smudged across his brow, the scent of hay and the earth clinging to him. He would pause at her door, as if sensing the unspoken connection that shimmered in the air. Each glance shared was electric, laden with something unsaid that hung between them like the promise of a storm. At times, Silas would sit on the edge of her bed, recounting stories from his childhood on the ranch, tales of mischief and trouble that would make her laugh. His eyes sparkled as he spoke, lighting up the dim room, illuminating her loneliness like fireflies in the dark. Yet, with each tale told, she felt the distance grow, an invisible chasm forged by her circumstances. His world was vibrant, filled with movement and thrill, while she remained anchored to silence, longing to join him in a life she could only glimpse through the glass. One evening, Silas entered the room with a different air about him, as if a storm brewed beneath the surface. He perched on the toasty edge of her bed, the tension palpable. "You can't just stay in here forever, Ilara," he said, his voice gruff but tender. "You deserve more than this." The words struck her like a bolt, igniting a flame of outrage within. "And what do you know of what I deserve?" His brow furrowed at her fiery response. How could he understand the weight of her existence, the shame of being bought like an object, the pain of being a burden? "I know enough," he replied, steel creeping into his tone. "To see you trapped in this place, I want to help you." The heat of her anger bubbled beneath the surface. "Help me, or help yourself." She could feel her heart racing, her words flaring into a wildfire of suppressed emotions. Silas recoiled slightly, and for a heartbeat the air felt heavy with unacknowledged truths. This was an argument they had never had, one that had been brewing for weeks under the guise of friendly banter. In that charged moment, Ilara's pulse quickened, the intensity of their shared friction igniting a flicker of hope. "You want to help me? Then see me as more than a charity case," she implored, her frustration mingling with vulnerability. "I'm not just someone your uncle bought. I have dreams, Ilara, a life I want to live," Silas countered, leaning closer, his voice now a whisper, softening as if to soothe the raw edges of their dispute. That vulnerability cracked something inside her, tearing at the protective cocoon she had woven around her heart. The silence that followed was thick, charged with the weight of unshed tears and unspoken aspirations. Ilara could feel the pulsing ache of his sincerity, and it terrified her. "You don't know what it's like," she whispered, her voice trembling, "to be trapped in this body, to watch everyone live a life you can't touch." Their shared silence spoke volumes, a doorway to understanding that neither had the courage to completely cross. In that moment, an unfiltered connection blossomed between them, a fragile thread woven through shared pain and unfulfilled desires. Silas reached out, his calloused hand brushing against hers, that feather-light touch igniting a spark that warmed her. The barriers of her insecurities began to crumble, and for the first time she saw not just a wealthy rancher in Silas, but a partner who might help her run from the life that kept her tethered. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a golden glow across the sprawling ranch. Ilara sat on the porch, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. The memory of her uncle's slurred threats echoed in her mind, a haunting reminder of a past she wished to escape. Silas, her new life's anchor, had welcomed her into his world, but the shadows of her past loomed like dark clouds, threatening to engulf the fragile peace she had found. Silas emerged from the barn, his hands dusted with hay and his brow furrowed in thought. He paused when he saw Ilara, her profile illuminated by the fading light. It had been a week since he'd brought her home, and while she had slowly begun to trust him, he felt a barrier remained, an invisible wall built from years of hurt and distrust. He took a step forward, unsure if it was the right move, but something compelled him to bridge the distance. "Hey, Ilara," he said, his voice low as he reached the bottom step. "I was wondering if you'd like to help me prepare dinner tonight." He searched her face for a response, hoping his invitation would break the silence that had settled between them ever since that first day. She had smiled faintly at times, but laughter felt like a foreign concept, and he longed to see it light up her features. Ilara's heart raced at the thought of spending time with Silas. The warmth of his presence was comforting, yet anxiety knotted her stomach. What if he saw her disability as a burden? She winced, the familiar sting of shame surfacing. I can't," she stammered, looking down at her legs, the evidence of her limitations stark and unforgiving. "I shouldn't be a bother." Silas stepped onto the porch, kneeling beside her. "You're not a bother, Ilara. I mean it. You're not just someone I brought home. You're part of this place now." His sincerity caught her off guard. For a moment, she allowed herself to hope, to envision a future where her worth wasn't defined by her inability to walk. But the shadows whispered, and she turned her head away, ashamed for wanting something that felt so out of reach. "I don't want to feel like a charity case," she murmured, the vulnerability of her words hanging in the air. I've been given so much already. I don't want to impose." Her voice trembled as the weight of her past threatened to crush her. Silas felt a pang of anguish shoot through him. He had only wanted to help her adjust, to show her there was beauty in this new life, but he never realized the depth of her struggles. Silas placed a gentle hand on her knee, grounding her in the moment. "You're more than that. You're resilient, stronger than anyone I've ever met. You deserve kindness, Ilara. You deserve to be happy." His eyes bore into hers, and she saw a flicker of something. Understanding, perhaps. It broke through the ice encasing her heart, just enough that she dared to look back, to let him in. Tears welled in Ilara's eyes, a testament to a lifetime of unspoken pain. "What if I can't be happy? What if I never get better?" She could feel her voice cracking, each word a raw wound. Silas's heart ached at her despair, a reminder that healing wasn't just physical, it was emotional and deep-rooted, tangled in her memories. "Then we'll find happiness together, no matter how long it takes," he replied, his voice unwavering. "You're not alone in this. I won't let you be." Ilara's breath hitched as she absorbed his promise. In that moment, something shifted between them, a shared understanding forged in vulnerability. She wanted to believe him, to accept that perhaps she could finally forge a path away from the shadows of her past. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the golden light faded, but the warmth lingered between them, a new dawn waiting just beyond the night. Ilara sat beneath the sprawling oak tree, its branches a canopy of green that filtered the sunlight into soft, dappled patterns on the ground. She had made this spot her sanctuary, the place where she could escape the shadows of her past and weave dreams of a future she yearned for. The breeze whispered through the leaves, carrying with it the scent of fresh earth and blooming wildflowers. Each inhale reminded her that she was alive, even in a world that had tried to strip that life from her. Silas approached quietly, his footsteps muffled by the thick grass. He had learned to tread softly around her, respecting the sacredness of her solitude. He paused for a moment, taking in the silhouette of Ilara, her profile etched against the sunlight, a figure of delicate resilience. She turned her head slightly and caught his gaze. In that brief moment, one of vulnerability shared between them, a connection shimmered beneath the surface. A bond formed in silence, stitched together by unspoken understanding. "Mind if I join you?" Silas asked, his voice low and steady. Ilara nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips, the gesture both simple and profound. It was the first smile he had witnessed since her arrival at the ranch, a flicker of warmth in an otherwise guarded demeanor. He lowered himself to the ground beside her, their shoulders brushing, an electrifying touch that sent ripples through the air between them. The two sat in comfortable silence, the vastness of the ranch stretching before them. Ilara's eyes wandered over the fields, the horses grazing lazily in the distance. She longed to feel the wind whip through her hair as she galloped freely, but she was anchored to the earth in a way that was both a reminder of her circumstances and a symbol of her tenacity. Silas noticed her gaze, the flicker of longing, and a sense of empathy welled within him. He wanted to show her the world beyond what she knew, to help her unfurl her wings despite the chains that still bound her. "Do you ever dream?" he asked, breaking their quietude. Ilara turned to him, surprise mingling with vulnerability. "Dream?" she repeated. "Of what?" His heart raced at the question's weight, but he pressed on. "Of flying, of running, of feeling the sun on your skin without worry." There was a light in her eyes then, a spark that hinted at the depths of her soul. "I dream of the ocean," she admitted softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of standing on a beach, feeling the waves wash over my feet." Silas turned toward her fully, his attention unwavering. "I can see it," he said with conviction. "I can see you there." The sincerity in his words stirred something deep within her, a blend of hope and fear. She longed for freedom, yet the weight of her reality loomed over her like an unyielding shadow. Silas reached out tentatively, his fingers brushing against the back of her hand. The touch sent a rush of warmth coursing through her, as if their connection forged a bridge over the chasm of their separate worlds. Ilara's breath hitched. She was both frightened and exhilarated by the contact. The ranch's solid presence provided a strange comfort, a shelter from the storm that had raged in her life for far too long. "Sometimes scars remind us of where we've been," he said, eyes locked onto hers, "but they don't have to dictate where we're going." Ilara searched his face for any hint of pity, but she found none. Instead, she saw a gentle strength, a promise of something beyond her current despair. The wall she had built around her heart trembled under the weight of his sincerity, and for the first time in a long while, she felt seen. "I want to run," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper, the weight of her heart laid bare. Silas's grip tightened slightly, as if he could somehow ground her, give her the strength to chase that dream. "Then, let's find a way, Ilara. We'll find a way together." In that moment, amid the rustle of leaves and the call of distant birds, their fates intertwined. A vow exchanged in the quiet realm of possibility, igniting a flicker of hope in the twilight of her despair. Ilara sat in the sunroom, the morning light filtering through the sheer curtains, casting intricate patterns on the wooden floor. Silas stood just beyond the threshold, his broad frame silhouetted against the light. He had been busy with the ranch, the hum of machinery echoing in the distance, yet here he lingered, watching her. Feeling the weight of his gaze, Ilara bit her lip, her heart racing. Today, the silence felt heavier, pressing down on her like a physical entity. She yearned to break it, to speak, yet fear wrapped around her like a vice, silencing her thoughts before they could materialize into sound. Her fingers played nervously with the edge of the blanket draped over her lap, a habit born of frustration and longing. A deep-seated urge swirled within her, a desperate need to voice the thoughts that crowded her mind, to share the dreams of normalcy that haunted her in the quiet moments. But every time she opened her mouth, a chasm of uncertainty swallowed her words, leaving only the echo of what-ifs lingering in the air. Ilara's eyes flickered towards Silas, his expression a mix of concern and patience. In these moments, his kindness felt both a balm and a reminder of her shortcomings. "Why can't I?" she whispered under her breath, the words barely audible to herself. They coiled around her like a question cast adrift in an ocean of despair. With each passing day, she felt the walls of her silence grow thicker. A world full of conversations and laughter lay just beyond her reach. But the thought of speaking felt like climbing an insurmountable mountain, each peak shadowed by her fears. Silas shifted, stepping into the sunroom fully. The light caught the lines of his face, deepening the warmth in his dark eyes. "You can," he said simply, his voice a steady anchor in her storm of thoughts. There was no judgment in his gaze, only an unwavering belief that hovered between them. In that moment, Ilara felt the flicker of hope ignite within her chest, battling against the shadows of doubt that had taken root over the years. Tension surged through her, a violent clash of longing and fear. Could she trust him? Could she trust herself? She had been sold like an object, thrust into a world where her worth was measured by her ability to conform, to comply, to remain silent. Yet here he stood, offering her a chance to rise above that. She could see the vulnerability in his eyes, a shared understanding of battling one's demons. If he could be brave enough to extend his hand, couldn't she be brave enough to take it? A deep breath rattled through her as she grappled with the weight of her decision. The room felt smaller, the air thick with anticipation. What if her voice cracked? What if the words tangled and sputtered, leaving her more exposed than before? But then she thought of her body, still, yet filled with a yearning to break free, to be more than the girl who could not walk. A small part of her began to believe that maybe, just maybe, her voice could be the first step towards freedom. Silas took a step closer, not rushing her, but willing to bridge the gap with his presence alone. "Ilara," he urged softly. "I believe in you." It was the simple truth of his words that shattered something inside her, a dam of emotion breaking free as the weight of his faith crashed over her like a flood. Those words held a power she had not anticipated, stirring the embers of her courage. Within her, an idea sparked, fragile yet tenacious, waiting for her to embrace it. With a sudden swell of determination, Ilara straightened her spine, lifting her chin. She would not allow fear to bind her any longer. She would not drown in the silence that had cloaked her for too long. Drawing on every ounce of strength, she opened her mouth, the unfamiliar taste of the air in her lungs igniting her senses. "Silas," she croaked, her voice rasping like an anchor being thrown against the tide. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. It was a simple utterance, yet it felt monumental, a declaration of her existence, her desire to be heard. Silas's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and delight flooding his features. He stepped closer, the warmth of his encouragement suffusing the space between them. "Yes, Ilara," he breathed, a smile blooming across his face. "That's it. Just keep going." In that moment, as her voice began to unravel like a tightly wound string, Ilara felt the chains of her past fall away. Each word she formed was a step forward, a journey from silence into the light, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe in the power of her voice. The moon hung low, a silver sentinel in a navy sky, casting a soft glow over the ranch. Silas stood outside, the cool night air mingling with the warmth of fading memories. A chill whispered through the tall grasses, rustling them as if urging him to confront the shadows of his past. In the distance, the barn loomed, a silent witness to the turmoil that had unfolded within its walls. He could still feel the weight of Ilara's presence, the fire in her spirit igniting a flicker of hope he thought long extinguished. Inside, Ilara sat on the edge of the bed, the moonlight spilling through the cracked window. She clutched a worn photograph, her fingers tracing the outline of a girl who had once danced under the sun, unbound by the limitations of her body. That girl felt like a stranger now, but Ilara could still feel her laughter, a distant echo of carefree moments. Her heart ached. The bitterness of her uncle's betrayal gnawed at her, but the pain birthed a new resolve. She would not let his actions define her future, would not let the scars of her past dictate who she could become. Silas's footsteps echoed down the hallway, each step a reminder of the bond they had forged amidst the wreckage of their lives. Approaching her door, he hesitated, his breath catching in his throat. The silence was palpable, an uneasy tension binding them. 1,000 unspoken words lingered in the air, mirroring the depth of their intertwined journeys. He knocked gently, a soft plea for connection, for understanding, for her to let him in, if only for a moment. "Ilara," he called softly, the name heavy with emotion. Deep within his chest, a familiar ache surged as he thought of how far they had come together. He remembered the moment he had first laid eyes on her, the vulnerability cloaked in strength, the fight hidden behind her spirit. She had been a firestorm, fierce and unyielding, and in that moment of vulnerability, he knew he had stumbled upon the greatest treasure of his life. His heart urged him to take the plunge, to bridge that gap and reach her. "Silas!" Her voice rang out, delicate yet resolute. The sound was a balm, soothing the raw edges of his anxiety. It was filled with longing, an invitation wrapped in layers of uncertainty. A breath escaped him as he turned the doorknob, stepping into the warm glow of the room, where shadows danced against the walls like echoes of their shared history. Silas found her gaze, and in that moment the world outside faded, leaving only the two of them suspended in time. "Why did you save me?" Ilara's voice trembled as she finally dared to confront the questions that had haunted her. She held the photograph tightly, her knuckles white, emotions swirling like a storm within her. "You could have turned away. You didn't have to care." Her vulnerability spilled forth, pouring into the space between them, the weight of her gratitude mingling with the haunting memories of her uncle's betrayal. The warmth of Silas's presence was both a comfort and a challenge, pushing her to confront the depths of her own turmoil. "Because you are worth saving," Silas replied, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "You were trapped, and I saw the light in you, even when you couldn't see it yourself." He stepped closer, the distance between them electrifying, an unbreakable tether of shared pain and healing. "You deserve to run, Ilara. You deserve to fly. I want to help you find that strength." Each word hung in the air, heavy with sincerity, wrapping around her heart like a promise forged in the fire of their struggles. For a moment, silence enveloped them, the world outside dissolving into the background. Ilara's breath caught as the emotions she had locked away swirled to the surface, raw and undeniable. In that heartbeat, she realized that it wasn't just his actions that had saved her. It was the way he saw her, the way he believed in her even when she couldn't believe in herself. And within that realization, a name rose within her, reverberating with clarity, bursting forth like a phoenix from ash. "Silas," she breathed, the name a prayer on her lips, a declaration filled with the weight of her truth. "Silas." Her voice grew stronger, echoing with the strength of her spirit. "You have given me a chance to run. You've shown me that I am more than my scars. I can be free." Each word resonated, a crescendo of realization, binding them together in a moment that transcended time and distance. In the flickering light of the moon, they stood on the precipice of a new beginning, their hearts entwined, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The sun dipped low, casting a golden hue over the sprawling fields, where the wind danced softly through the tall grass. Ilara stood at the edge of the meadow, breathless, her heart swelling with an unfamiliar warmth. Silas, tall and stoic, stepped beside her, the weight of the world seeming to lift as he silently offered his hand. With a hesitant glance, she reached out, fingers brushing against his. In that moment, the air thickened with unspoken words, the distance between them evaporating like mist in the morning sun. Ilara closed her eyes, feeling the earth beneath her feet, a pulse of life coursing through her. She took a step forward, the sensation surging through her, vibrant and dizzying like the vibrant blooms that danced around them. Silas watched, breath held tight as their shadows intertwined, a tapestry woven from hope and healing. She took another step, then another until laughter bubbled forth, a melodic sound that echoed in the stillness. The fields embraced them as they moved together, each step a testament to freedom, each breath a promise of new beginnings. In the quiet symphony of rustling leaves, they found their rhythm, two souls intertwined in a world reborn.